Hello, and you are very welcome to something of an experiment, certainly a new departure for the Alliance of Independent Authors. Of course, the whole rights selling and buying arena is dominated by trade publishing, very much so, much more so than any other aspect of publishing. And now that is changing, and there is an organisation called PubMatch that is very involved in trying to change that, and we'll be hearing from them in a little while as well. But this program that we're doing, this kind of rights roundtable program that we're going to be doing over the next 6 months, is an attempt to change that as well. So what we're doing here, folks, is we are going to put together a panel of authors and talk them through the process of selling, licensing their publishing rights. And we have, we put a call out, and Sasha will tell you about the process and how it's been working and what to expect going forward in a few moments. But essentially, we put a call out to indie authors, and we got a lot of responses. We know there are a lot of you who are interested in taking your publishing to the next level. When an indie author gets good at selling their books in English, audiobooks, ebooks, print books, whichever of those three formats that they want to do, or all of those formats, then the next thing they naturally start to think about is their publishing rights and all these different rights that they have wrapped up in this thing we call a book. So we know that there are indies who are individually selling their rights. We know that there are indie-friendly literary agents who are selling rights for their self-publishing authors. But we want to know much more about what's going on, and we want to also see people actually going through the experience. Sasha, can you just talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing here over the next 6 months?
Yeah. So for anybody who kind of missed the promotion of this in the run up to this first meeting, kind of anybody watching, I'll just explain where we came from. So we promoted this opportunity to the Alliance membership and also to the 20 books to 50k, not membership, but kind of group, and also at their Edinburgh conference. We only asked for a couple of bits of information, so quantity of sales, and that wasn't to exclude anybody, but just because we know that rights buyers tend to be very interested at around the 50k number of sales, or KU equivalent book sales. So we didn't want to bring anybody on who might be disappointed, because that's where rights buyers tend to get interested. We also asked for genres and why people would like to be part of this, why they're kind of highly motivated. So I think we had a total of 44 or 45 applications, which we've now shortlisted down to 9-ish. Yeah. And part of this conversation will be then to narrow that group down again to the very last, where I think we're going to go for between 2 and 4 authors who will go through this process. And this process is a weekly kind of, not weekly, oh my God, no, sorry. It's kind of a six weekly, sorry, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I quit. Yeah. Sorry. A 6 weekly-ish meeting virtually with ourselves, and the aim of those sessions will be to get to the point where the authors have got those meetings set up at London Book Fair, so that they don't turn up without those meetings. They have done the work, they've established the connections, they have had the initial phone calls or whatever it is that they need to do, with the help and support and guidance of you experts. And then hopefully at London Book Fair, we will then be able to kind of record, interview the authors post sort of those meetings, so that we then have the outcomes of this program as well. And then it will be shared in hopefully a variety of different formats for everybody, be it 20 Books members or ALLi members or Joe Public, I suppose, indie authors.
I started releasing a series called The Arthurian Gambit just a little bit under 4 years ago. And a year later, I was doing 6 figures a month in sales in this sci-fi paranormal area. Or we've produced 200 audio titles of our own. And then recently, through Judith's effort, we've also licensed 100 audiobooks in the last about 90 days or so. So that leaves us another 300 in our backlist, and we grow at a rate of about 100 new titles every quarter to 4 months.
When I came onto the company, I had a background in the medical device pharma world. And so I was familiar with selling and buying rights for pharmaceuticals in, the billions of dollars. So coming into the publication world, and in particular into the indie space, it was incumbent upon me to then not downsize, but to really right-size the mentality of how the rights world was for the publication standpoint, in particular when you didn't have a big house behind you or a big brand behind you that wasn't known. So the first meeting that we went to was Frankfurt. And as Michael stated before, I'm not sure if it was on the recording or not, I read your book in order to familiarize myself with what I needed to do to come up to speed. Now,
as we're flying to
Frankfurt, the first meeting. Now, mind you, in all fairness to me, I had just come on board like the week before. So I'm reading your book, which really is an outstanding book to lay down what you need to do. And one of the requirements was that you should have a sell sheet, which to me was, what a no-brainer. I should have known that. So it was really, it was, I was on the plane making notes. We had a graphics person help us, and we put something quickly and literally had it printed out before we went to the meeting, like the local printer. I'll also attest to PubMatch, because part of what we did afterwards, subsequent after the meeting, was there was requirements to put together a catalog. And
a year ago?
Yes, and so I looked up PubMatch, and Mike had said, we have an account with PubMatch because they're providing services to indie authors. So I used PubMatch to put together our first catalog, which I sent to a Chinese rights buyer, and we were able to sign a contract based on a catalog that I put together from PubMatch. So I think that the combination that we're putting together now is really key. But back to your point as to why we're here, going to Frankfurt subsequent to the London Book Fair, you go into the rights, what I call bullpen, and you walk into this sea of individuals. And like I said, although I was experienced in selling and buying rights previously, I thought, well, I'm going to come in here and know what to do. Well, I didn't. And so, we had a discussion in London and said, how do we, as indie publishers, get to know this world? And you kindly offered to put together this panel, and so that we could share the information, because we thought whatever we learn, we want to share. Mike started his, publishing career in sharing and sharing in knowledge, and I'll turn it over to him right now to talk about it. But ultimately, at the core of what we are as a corporation is really information sharing. And so that's why we decided that it'd be great to have something like this. And with your assistance and PubMatch coming on, it's great because we can then share the knowledge and learnings that we can gain from the experience that's put together here. So, Michael, up to you.
Yeah, so, for what's going on, so it was our second London. It was my first time, and we were meeting with you. And I laid out the question that we're still not understanding. We've read a lot of stuff. We've met John. John took us through PubMatch. We used the software. We had all these opportunities. And you'd said something, I think, that was the one bombshell, if you will, is like, if you're coming here and you don't have meetings, it's too late. And from my perspective, or at least my ignorance, it was really a situation of, with the expectation was we go there to meet people, and it's like, no, you come here to consummate something that you've already done, whether it's to meet a person because you've pre-set up that meeting, or it's to close a deal so that you can do the PR. And so it's like, all right, would you be willing to work with us where we can try to bring something together and take this knowledge that we need, obviously, as well as others need in the 20 books to 50K group, and can we all promote it? Thus, we're here.
Everybody, this is Ethan Ellenberg, who is a very pro-indie literary agent based in New York, a great agency with lots of writers that you will have heard of.
Thank you, Orna. Well, the agency is based in New York. My background is in professional publishing. We've been active since 85 or so. We represent a lot of commercial fiction, science fiction, fantasy particularly. We represent the bestsellers John Scalzi and Dennis E. Taylor. We represent 6 literary estates. There are 3 active agents in the agency, myself, Evan Gregory based in Austin, and B.B. Lewis, who's also in the office. And we're very active, very interested in what's going on now, and see a really, obviously, very active environment, tremendous amount of change, and just really the business is very different from the business that I started in. I'm also the founder of Royalty Reminder, which is a software program that helps authors inventory, manage, and exploit their licenses and agreements. And we've been working on that for a while now and finding a lot of interest. Basically, authors need a lifetime inventory of their contracts and licenses in order to be effective. And it's especially important for estates and heirs, but just as importantly for the author with 10, 20, 30, 40 agreements, especially in the new publishing ecosystem, which to me is defined by the birth of the internet and the ability to market across the entire world for the average author, and the ebook and the audiobook, self-publishing particularly, where there are many authors who can take their reverted titles and bring them back into active life and financially active life, even more important.
John Malinowski from PubMatch.
PubMatch was born about 11 years ago, and the idea came from the Beijing Book Fair, at the Beijing Book Fair, as a matter of fact. I won't go into why it was born at Beijing Book Fair, but it was. And it really was initially developed for our USA Pavilion participants. We organize the USA Pavilion around the world with Combined Book Exhibit and American Collective Stand. And we wanted to make it easier for our publishers to interact with foreign publishers when they're at the shows to connect and network. So we developed it from that. And then the next year, an agent from Taiwan contacted me and said they wanted to meet at Beijing again. And she said that she found it and was using it for her agenting. And that if we did certain things with it, she was sure that other publishers and agents would use it as well. So she sort of became our agent consultant, and we started developing the rights platform that it is today. PubMatch has gone through, I don't know how many iterations. We've just completed a 2-year upgrade in programming with all the latest PHP tools and programming and coding to make it a little easier, make it faster. Easier was the main idea behind it, because rights can be a little complicated. And since there's no standardization in the rights area anywhere, that was our main challenge. So we're sort of dealing with that issue right now in terms of how people actually price out their rights in the various markets, their languages, because there's the huge price differences between Bulgaria and Germany, for example, or China or the Middle East. So we're sort of disrupting the industry, as you might think, in terms of trying to change the way publishers and agents deal with rights. So
fantastic. Disrupt. Yeah. It's our favorite word. We love it.
Yes.
Yes.
There you go, guys. So that's where we're at with PubMatch right now. We've made it the pricing on it. We've made it very low in order to entice people to come on.
Okay, and what percentage are buyers, actual rights buyers, as opposed to sellers? Because obviously, if it's 50% authors, most of those, almost all of those, are going to be sellers, right?
Right. We ask when people go on whether they're a buyer, seller, or both. Many do say sellers, but right now we have probably about 1,200 that are buyers and sellers, and about 800 that are buyers alone. So about a total universe about 2,000 that are on right now.
I come out of a foreign rights background. Originally, I used to work as a junior foreign rights agent when I first started. And I have more of an international kind of background in languages and rights, but as the rights world, as John points out, is kind of proliferating and getting more complicated, I'm trying to evolve with it and understand what's happening. And so I'm still involved in that changing world of rights and seeing how that intelligence can be incorporated into PubMatch, along in the author lines and also the international side as well. So I'm kind of on both sides of it. It's a small team.
Sure, yeah. Well, it's fantastic. I mean, the Alliance had an alliance with PubMatch some years ago, and I think we all know much more now about the indie world, how it operates, what works, what doesn't work, and so we're delighted to be aligning again and offering a new offer, a very generous offer to our authors, and we'll talk about that again later on. Okay, so just one thing I want to pick up on before just handing over to Sasha, who's going to tell us about the project that we're actually engaged in here and what we're going to be doing over the next 6 months, is I'd just like to pick up on that catalogue and the sell sheet, because without those two tools in place, you really can't even begin to have a conversation. And that's why PubMatch is such a useful tool for our authors, and why we will be having this arrangement whereby ALLi authors will have a global sort of catalogue, and the 50 books guys I think possibly the same. And within that, each individual author can have set out their books, their book information, their metadata in the way that a rights buyer expects to receive it. So it is similar but a bit different to any other kind of explainer or book description sheet that you might be putting out there. It needs to be done in that particular way, and PubMatch makes all of that very easy. It's very easy to share it and very easy to print it off and so on.
It was interesting because, I happen to know quite a few of the people that were in here, and I felt, one, that I absolutely could not choose 3 people that I knew. I could only choose one of the people that I knew, and I would force myself to choose 2 others that I did not, and for various reasons. So one of the individuals, I chose 3, and I chose them in different genres. So I chose one in what I would consider a very almost niche genre, so that I wanted a representative of something that is really big here in America, but it came from Russia. That's Lit RPG. And someone that I knew was already teaching, training, and I have 2 companies that I could do that with. I just happen to have been associated with one recently in Edinburgh, and I'm just going to slow you down there first. So just to explain for people who don't know what Lit RPG is, and also Absolutely. If you can name the author that you're talking about. Sure. So Dakota Kraut and his company, which I'm going to, because my wife is pulling it up here, but I'm probably going to Mountaindale Press. And they have multiple authors now. The situation with Dakota is that he comes from Lit RPG, which is a fantasy-like, or it can actually be any genre, but it brings in game elements or gaming elements, so that you write into the story when people have accumulated extra talent points or hit points or experience points, and the decision tree that they use to go up. This particular genre came over from the Russians, I believe. And from there, America is going big. We see it happening in Germany, but it is a very niche genre. So what are the challenges when you have something, books that are in the top 20 of Amazon when they release, and that's all of Amazon. And so this is a 7-figure company. They're doing very well, and I believe that they would be good from the standpoint of training others, being able to ask insightful questions.
He said that he wants to be a nice person. He doesn't want to work with anybody who's not nice. I won't use foul language here, but I would describe it differently. But in any case, And so I thought he was very giving in the information he was providing. As a matter of fact, afterwards, I think he spent some time with anybody who wanted to ask him questions, and he was bombarded with them. So I thought this is the kind of individual we want to guide along, because they will go ahead and whatever they learn, they will share. And so that's why I chose them. They're very successful in the genre. They are lit RPG, but more importantly to me as an individual at the core is just his ethos of sharing and being a good person.
I think from my perspective, just listening to both of you talking for the various different reasons, I think that's an easy one to say yes to.
So the second one that I chose had to do with nonfiction. One of them has to do with more of a nonfiction effort. And they're doing, I want to say, to the extent of beyond 6 figures in sales in one book. And I found that to be pretty relevant. So it's going to be Barry McDonough.
Yeah. McDonough, actually.
McDonough.
Barry writes about anxiety, doesn't he? He's written a non-fiction guidebook to coping with anxiety.
And so the reason that I chose Barry was because I believe he has over 100,000 in sales. It's nonfiction, which is not normal for us. He's got over 1,000 reviews. He's launched consistent month over month. He has inquiries about all the time about the availability and other ones. So he's constantly fielding requests. And I felt that it would be different than, even though we have a lot of books, we only field a few requests. And so I thought that would give us some really interesting aspects to, what is the advice for him? And then the last one we have is Claire Benson. She's done approximately 320 to 400,000. She's got a couple of historical books coming out with Bookstore. And one of the reasons that I found her interesting is she's a former translator herself. And so from a translator's perspective, she has the choices whether or not she should do the translation, hire someone. And as a company that we have our own translation group, if you will, we have a partner in Germany, LMBP in German. And so we do translations, but we're still looking at the IP as well. And I thought as a translator, she would give us viable information on the degree of difficulty translations are. Because I felt like in the beginning that whenever I created a book, it wasn't that big a deal. Outsourced some cover, outsourced some editing. We had a product and it wasn't that expensive. And then I stepped into the audio and I found out what expense could actually be. And then I found out that translations makes audio almost looks like a nonprofit organization. And so the risk for translation is so high comparative to either audio or just doing it yourself. I thought it would be interesting and fascinating to get her thought process, knowing her background.
We will be choosing 3 people or maybe 4 to go on to do this work with us, be on the actual panel, but we may well draw in some of this expertise as we go through as well, in different ways, because we're going to have to just pick 3 and those 3 will be brilliant. So give us 3 more, Judith.
Okay, so I chose Charlotte Ripkin. I thought it was interesting that they had a French background. And I wanted to make sure that we had some diversity in the choices because, human nature being what it is, we tend to usually go with what we know, right? So I thought, somebody that is, they said they're a French hybrid. They're interested in going into foreign translations. They're usually at the top of their category in French, but they want to expand. So I thought, okay, well, that'd be really great to look at and see if there was a possibility to include them in the process.
So one thing I find out fascinating, I haven't actually looked at Judith's choices, so I didn't know who they were. But one thing that as I'm looking over here at and seeing it, she wants to come into English. So as a Brights Byron company, it'd be interesting for me to actually go, well, yeah, I'd love to chat with you. I
also chose Jeremy Williams. I think that one of the things that I liked about them was the fact that he's interested in developing a universe. And then he happens to cite, this actually did not have much influence. I mean, maybe it did personally and a bias. He did cite Mike's Universe and the Arthurian Gambit, which I really loved. He said, if you're not familiar with Michael Anderle or that universe, he says it's equivalent to the Avengers. And I thought, okay, great. So that was something that I thought was interesting. The fact that he wants to develop this universe, and in the development of the universe, he wants to go ahead and sell the rights. He's interested, and he said he'd be willing to go to Germany as well. So there was a lot of interest in his application to do things. He was willing to do the work, and I thought, okay, this speaks well of somebody that we might want to, choose.
And that's absolutely brilliant. And I think I was also super interested, but because I saw they were on your list, I was looking for 3 other people. So, but I think just from the point of view of the micro niche thing, because I have this theory that actually the more micro niche you are as an indie, the more successful you're possibly going to be. But for all the other reasons that you cited as well, let's say that's a pass. So we've got 2 more spaces, and I'll just talk very briefly about the 3 people that I suggested. Barry Hutchinson, who is a science fiction author, and one of the things that interested me about Barry's submission was that he has already sold German rights to his children's books, but not to his adult. And so I thought, having had that experience, he has sold those. However, his publishers did the selling for him. He has been trade published before. He has done super well with his own series, and so I think over 100,000 on his science fiction, and now he's doing crime fiction, and he's super successful on Amazon. So,
on the crime fiction, one of the things I find interesting about Barry, and before, weeks ago when we were talking about this in a separate conversation, we wanted other genres. And I find that Barry's foray into the crime fiction, thriller fiction area would be pretty relevant, and not the least of which is he's just a fun guy.
He's a good one. Yeah, we have the same motto as Dakota. We don't work with bad guys either. So
yes.
I mean, why be Indian? Wind up working with bad people? Makes no sense. It would be interesting to have somebody in crime. Also, Joe, for a similar reason, Joe Cawley writes travel memoir. Now, he's a non-fiction writer, and I think we would have to choose between him and Barry McDonough. I think one non-fiction author on the panel would probably be a good idea. I'd be interested to hear Ryan and John's opinion on that. And then Skye McKinnon. Skye is just super focused person, and the kind of person who she grew up in Germany. She's bilingual, she speaks German as well. She also speaks French, and she's really focused on the idea of getting her books sold. And she does a number of different genres. And she's got some of the romance. Some of her books are in romance genre. She also does romantic suspense. So again, from the perspective of trying to get some people who are writing in different areas, I thought she would be good. So PubMatch people, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
Well, I kind of like the series aspect with Skye, only because just coming back from Beijing, the Chinese publishers love series, and they do a lot with the series in terms of taking the entire group and putting it all as one book, and then creating thousands and thousands of copies, and then selling it through CNPIEC, which is the largest distributor in China. So I sort of like that aspect. But in terms of the others, I think your choices are good, and you've got good reasoning behind them. So I trust your instincts, all of you.
I like it. Joe, is it Cowley? Is that how you
Cawley.
say it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I like the inclusion of a travel memoir, something in that vein. It's a great developing area. Travel memoir.
And Ryan has background in the travel industry and has taught courses at the university level on travel, so he's got some experience with that.
I have, but yeah. I mean, even just in terms of the writing going on in that space is very interesting and compelling. I think it would be great. And also the romance genre. I mean, in any kind of any stripe. I mean, it's the agency that I started out with was Fern Michael's agency, and we did Dorchester books, and it doesn't seem to be slowing down at all.
No,
And I think
love is always in fashion.
always in fashion. Romance is always in fashion. So I think I think that's a great, again, two great areas.
Yeah, so in the two nonfictions that we have a choice on, one of them, which is the Joe Cowley, which is more ketchup than salsa, Confessions of a I cannot pronounce this, Tenerife barman?
Tenerife, yeah.
Tenerife. And so this is, I mean, it's a memoir. It's not like a travel, which if you had heard us just say travel, you might think it's you know.
Kind of dry, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of dry. No, this is actually a multi-part series related to two individuals that went to another location in the world thinking that they're going to have the world is their oyster, and it doesn't happen. So that's kind of one of them. I did also look at this one as well, and I was like, only going to get one particular nonfiction here. And then, of course, we have the other one, which is on anxiety. It's more data-driven, anxiety, helping people that goes across multi. So I would love to hear, John, your opinion on this, because you guys, we've met you guys around the world, and we know that you go to a lot of different events we never touch at. And so just from those two areas, where do you see more activity happening in books and books being sold, the IP back and forth?
The anxiety area seems to be hot, only because we have American Psychological Association with us at a lot of the venues, and they have a lot of books on anxiety. And they also have a children's line that's doing exceptionally well, revolving around this and other ailments that kids have. So, and they've basically sold all of their rights on the children's side around this genre, mostly in China. So they're pushing that area. So I think, that area would be a hot area to look at.
It is the malaise of our age. And I think I don't know how you guys feel about this, but it might be worth our while saying we'll do 2 fiction and 2 nonfiction, because the 2 nonfiction books that we have here seem to represent very well the 2 big strands of nonfiction, the how-to, practical, sort of on the one hand, as you say, Mike, data-driven then in terms of marketing, and the other memoir, which is more, closer to fiction, storytelling. It's funny as well, more catch up. It's a very different kind of read. So it might be interesting maybe to do 2 nonfiction and 2 fiction. You guys are also going to be representing the writing side. You're going to be offering your expertise and knowledge, which you've already accumulated, that you have definitely accumulated, but you're also going to be there to learn from the whole process. And I would like to hold up the poetry side, because I write poetry, and I know nobody thinks about poetry, but poetry is actually having a huge moment in the indie world, to everybody's surprise. So I would like to actually be talking a little bit as we go through this process as a poet, as a writer of poetry, and how rights happen there, and whether, if they're not happening, why they're not happening, and how we might change that. So I think let's look and see who else we have. If we were to go with Skye, Dakota, Barry, and Joe, then Orna, Judith, and Michael. That's the 7 writers. I think that's a reasonable gender spread. Perhaps need one more mainstream, because Dakota's is so niche. Do we need, you guys represent the
only thing we don't, I think Skye represents romance, correct?
Yeah.
So we have romance. You said Barry, correct?
Yeah, and he's...
All right, so we're going to keep him from, because while he does have the sci-fi humor, it's really more the thriller opportunity.
Yeah,
and
I thought Barry was the nonfiction.
We have 2 Barrys, just to confuse matters. Barry Hutchins is the fiction writer, and Barry McDonough is the nonfiction writer.
So who's going on the list? Sorry.
Well, the proposal, we haven't decided yet, but so far we're looking at Skye, the 2 Barrys, and Joe.
So it'll be a little large, but I think that if we handle the meetings well, then we'll be able to keep it short and try to do it, because we can take care of most genres that aren't represented.
Yes, and I can help out on that as well, I think, and Sasha too.
So hopefully you've seen the shortlist. So, and I will send round a finalised shortlist as well. But Dakota and Danielle Kraut, who I'm just going up through the list now. So they work in a subgenre lit RPG. We then have Skye McKinnon, I think that's how you say her surname. So she writes in a number of genres and kind of romance genres. We then also have Barry Hutchinson, who writes kind of space opera, is that right? I think it's space opera, space team, science fiction, but also in crime and kind of thriller, which I think is where our interests lie for this one. And then we have two non-fiction authors. One, Barry McDonough, who... who has written a non-fiction book about anxiety. And then last, we also have Jo Corley, who has written I'm guessing it's sort of semi-humorous, but kind of a travel memoir, big dreams, things go wrong, that kind of area. So I think that is, and then obviously Orna and Michael. Orna is going to represent kind of the poetry, and then obviously Michael and his entire universe.
We haven't really encountered the author buying the rights yet. At least I haven't heard of anything. So that would be something very new. But the biggest problem, the author really doesn't know how to go about the whole rights process. And that's the biggest issue, I think. They really have to have some experience in the past in order to do that. And most authors are asking tons of questions on the process. So it's been an education process for us.
Knowledge that it takes to sell translation rights, I'll focus on that, is very, very large. It takes a lot. I've been selling rights for 30 years and go to London, go to Frankfurt, and I have a series of co-agents that I work with. We try to feed information to literary scouts, which are part of the ecosystem. It's a very hard thing to do. So when an indie author enters that world, it's really like coming out of the cave, you know. All of a sudden, I have something valuable, and I got a letter from a publisher in Poland or China. What do I do next? And there's a tremendous amount of knowledge just to reach the comfort zone where you feel like you have agency, you're capable of managing yourself. So that's a vast area. And we could talk about what it takes to sell rights, which I think was certainly something you wanted to do. But just to get back to the beginning, when authors are acting as packages and buying rights, that is a negotiation regarding value. Who is putting up what in their property and what they're getting for it? I think that is right or wrong in the sense that, as Michael said, don't gouge, but the actual value exchange of what's worth it to who is an interesting question and always up for grabs. And let me just end here with one vote for my traditional publishers to remember that they're working with a completely different paradigm.
Yes.
When they enter the process, they are taking an unedited manuscript, they are editing it, they are producing it, they are manufacturing printed copies for distribution in bookstores and promoting and publicizing it. They might not always do a great job, but their initial investment is vast. And the one thing they have that nobody has is the ability to distribute into bookstores, into book chains across the country. And that's, you cannot duplicate that. And that is a tremendous value. And they are pushing us around a bit more than they used to because they realize that remains a tremendous value, the traditional publishing and the traditional publisher. I understand their point of view and I'm sympathetic. I will say that I think holding on to rights, refusing to revert is outrageous and wrong. But the notion that they shouldn't have a real claim after they make that tremendous investment, I don't support that. And remember, their roots go back 100 and 200 years. They're behaving the way they grew up behaving. And I don't think I could fault them for that. You know,
well, with respect, there was a certain amount of money that used to be paid for, say, UK rights or US rights. And when ebooks came in, that very quickly became world rights and all rights without recognizing that those rights had separate value. So I agree with you completely, and I very much understand the trade publishing world. Worked very briefly myself as a literary agent, enough to understand how it works and how it operates. But I will say, when we talk about trade publishing, we're talking about a vast, sector. And there are lots of people within that sector who behave extremely well. But trust me, there are lots of people in that sector who do not behave well at all. And we deal every single day of the week with authors who have been at the receiving end of contracts that are frankly appalling. And that's in the self-publishing sector as well as the trade publishing sector. So anyway, this is interesting, and all the different perspectives that we're going to bring to this whole project is going to be fascinating, I think, and unique, and I don't think anybody else has ever done anything quite like this. So have we made our decision in terms of our authors? I think we have.
Yes.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay, so Sasha will distribute after the meeting our decision, and will inform the authors and let the rest of the shortlist know what happened. This time we may pull in some people from the shortlist and some other high-achieving indies who are doing interesting things in the world of rights, whether it's kind of doing it themselves in a different way for the first time or whatever. Over the coming 6 months. We'll also work out a schedule for the events so that everybody knows when these are going to happen, and we get the world clock right so that we are actually on time. So just, if I could ask each of you for a sort of closing remark about your perspective on this project, why you're here, and what you hope that at the end of 6 months we will have achieved as a group together.
Okay, if I may, for LMBPN, I can say that this is an evolution for us. There's no right or wrong way. We're learning, and which is why we're interested in taking part in the process, and which is why we began the question. So we look forward to working together as a team with the ultimate goal to share the information and share the learnings, and hopefully help indie authors in particular to navigate through the myriad of rights selling.
Fantastic, thank you. PubMatch people.
Yeah, we're very much looking forward to this and helping these authors get a global outreach and working with them. I'm assuming that they don't have agents, or they do have it. I'm not sure if they do or not, but if they don't, I'm hoping that PubMatch can help them sell more rights globally, and looking forward to working with them in creating those rights in different territories and languages around the world.
Fantastic. We'll find out about the agent question. Wasn't a question that we asked them up front, and it's possible that some of them may, and probably some of them have, some of them haven't, but we will include that. Sasha, will you take a note of that question to ask the authors? Yeah. And
by the way, the PubMatch works with agents within PubMatch now. So we don't exclude agents. I think we have about 200 agents on PubMatch now, many of which who are invisible on PubMatch, which you can be invisible, and they're just using the database and the tools to manage their rights. So we certainly don't exclude agents. We built it to work with agents.
And indeed, some agents are now setting up as publishers as well, and some agents are setting up as rights buyers directly themselves. So, it's all getting very, very fluid. Ethan.
Well, I'm wearing both my hats. I want to share my knowledge. I've been selling rights for many years. I see the challenges. It's a tremendously challenging area that takes a lot of knowledge, a lot of connections, a lot of work. So I'm happy to share my knowledge, interested in helping indie authors fully understand the whole sector. And as a Royalty Reminder founder, we are a author-centric, author-empowering software program. We want all authors to have lifetime author income, inventory everything that they've ever created, be able to monetize it and manage it. We work with heirs and with estates, and we see that with copyright being life plus 70, authors need to understand the full value of copyright, the full value of the book, the full value of intellectual property.
Fantastic. Sasha?
So I suppose from my perspective, I'm very interested in this as somebody who's kind of coming up, not quite ready to sell rights. So in my mind, it's how can I get this information across to the broad spectrum of authors in our collective memberships, and how we can, get this across in a digestible way that's easy to understand. So I'm kind of thinking about the end goal and what does this look like for everybody afterwards, and kind of how we package this. And I was very interested in things like the sell sheets and exciting things we can do for people. So yeah.
I'm Dakota Kraut.
And I'm Danielle Kraut, and together we are a husband and wife team that co-own and operate a small indie publishing house, Mountaindale Press, which specializes in publishing lit RPG and game lit titles.
And we're interested in the foreign rights translation training because with over 500,000 books sold, with a backlist that is starting to approach double digits for me personally, as well as our authors, we thought that it was time to start looking at a more worldwide scale, if at all possible. So thank you for this opportunity, and we look forward to meeting and working with all of you.
Very excited.
Hello, I'm Barry Hutchison. I am a full-time author living here in the Highlands of Scotland. It's raining outside, so don't look. But then it's always raining. But I've been a full-time author for about 11 years. And I think once you've created that product, the book, and those characters, then it's good to be able to bring in as many revenue streams as possible from that work you've already done. Obviously you can write more books, but when you've still got potentially money on the table for that product, that book, then why not try to bring some of that money in? So that's why I wanted to get involved in the rights program. I think it's about getting those books, which have done very well for me in the UK and in the US, out to a wider audience worldwide, and get some translations done.
Hello, my name's Joe Corley. I'm an author, travel writer and ghostwriter. First of all, thanks for letting me join this group. I'm sure it's going to be very useful, particularly to get to sell some more foreign rights on my books, which are mainly memoirs. I've written a trilogy of memoirs called More Ketchup Than Salsa. I've sold Estonian and Polish rights so far, but I really like to sell Spanish and German. Books have done well, probably first one sold over 60,000 copies, plus another 140,000 in free downloads and promos. I'm really looking for help to reach out to the foreign agents, as I believe the books could do really well in these markets. I'm also a travel writer. I write for the Sunday Telegraph, the Times, the Guardian, New York Post, Taipei Times, lots of publications, and I'm a ghostwriter as well. I do have an agent for a ghostwriting project that I'm currently working on, but that's solely for that project.
Hiya, my name is Skye McKinnon. I'm an author from the west of Scotland, and I have about 40 plus minus books published just now. Some of them are co-written, some are novellas, but according to Kobo right now it's 48 books plus 8 picture books, which I write as ALLi Winter. But most of my time is spent on adult books as Skye. I write mostly reverse harem, so that is romance where you have one woman and several men or sometimes women in a relationship. And I write that in a variety of genre. I've got fantasy, paranormal romance, urban fantasy, but I've also got sci-fi, steampunk, bit of contemporary romance, so I don't like to stick to one thing basically. A year ago I went full-time, and I became a USA Today bestseller. I've got international bestseller. Won some reader awards as well. But yeah, it's all been a bit of a one big roller coaster. Anyway, I want to rely more on my backlist. One way of doing that is that I've started doing more ads because I didn't do much advertising before. And the other way I hope to do that is through selling foreign rights. Now, as you might hear from my accent, I'm quite international. I wasn't born in Scotland. I've lived in several countries. I am bilingual in German and English. I know some French. And I've read books in several different languages, so it's quite natural for me to want to expand into different foreign markets.
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the different member types, because we have associate members who are just thinking about that, they're preparing a book for self-publishing. We have our author membership, and they are people who have self-published and are over the stage of how do I make a book into how do I sell this book. And then we have our entrepreneur members who have succeeded very well in selling. They have sold 50,000 copies or 2 million or so page reads in the last 2 years. So they are actually sort of making a living from writing, and each of those cohorts will want different things from this education program that we're kind of putting together. So for us, it is mainly about the knowledge at a real practical level, hands-on, not just talking about what's possible, but actually seeing if it is in fact possible when you get down to it. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to working with you all over the next 6 months. Thank you so much for giving your time and expertise to this project. And yes, we will be in touch, and we will be back soon, everybody, with news of how to catch our next episode. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Orna.
Thank you.